President Donald. What's wrong with him? I don't know. I ain't even gonna waste your time. We got a lot to talk about today. Let's get to it. Let's talk. Let's talk, Khalid Bay.
Hey, this is Rob Romeo.
And today, Rob, we got a lot to talk about, but we can start with your not so favorite guy.
Who's that?
Occupier of the White House. You know, his effort initially, failed effort to send in the National Guard, and interestingly enough, 700 Marines to back up the National Guard into California for what was a scheduled protest.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
This is the manifestation, a big word, of the whitening of America and the attack on political opponents. It's just completely obvious and stated on the record that we're going to go after blue city Democratic places, and we're going to clean out non-whites. That's it. I mean, that's what this is about, and it's stated. So, I think at the same time, America's woken up a little bit. We're talking about kings. I like the word fascists more than kings, because these guys are fascists through and through.
Yeah.
Don't take my word for it. Don't even look at General Kelly. You know, these guys, General Kelly, General Mattis, General Stanley McChrystal, General Barry McCaffrey. These guys know the history of the 21st century and the 20th century, and they understand where fascists came from, how they operate, and what they do. This guy is right by the book, fascism.
Yeah.
And so this is an opportunity he sees it that when you get one image of a burning car and a Mexican with a Mexican flag, they'll blow that image up and put that out there, and that will be the clickbait for the entire MAGA movement for the next so many months or years.
Yeah.
So that's what they're after. They're after nothing else. Finally, and I'm sorry, I'm talking so much.
Yeah.
Finally, what they realize, or what they have not even realized, but what they have been stopped in doing in their tracks because of the well-off agricultural industry, the leaders, the captains of that industry, the well-off hospitality industry, the leaders and captains of that industry. They should also be talking with well-off construction industry.
For sure.
So once those people have gotten the ear of this guy, we'll call him this guy, and said, look, you can't go rounding up our workers, otherwise we can't produce, otherwise the economy crashes. They're good people and they're good workers.
Yeah.
And what Americans, don't understand, this is so obvious from the beginning. This is like, such an obvious thing that we need these immigrants, and it's a benefit to the country all the way around. Immigrants are not, 99%, if you look at the number, 99.9% are not criminal or racist.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And they do not drain our economy, they add to the economy. So in other words, they pay taxes. They come into the country and they pay taxes. Those taxes go to support Medicaid. Those taxes go to support Social Security. They don't get that back.
Right.
It is beyond belief that they have gotten Americans thinking that immigrants are a problem and they're taking their jobs and they're hurting the country.
Yeah, I think the precedents that have been set over this short period of time clearly has international implications. The respect for the United States as a global leader has grossly diminished.
Grossly diminished.
I watched the new Prime Minister of Canada talk about how the relationship is essentially over.
Yeah.
With its greatest ally. And, just looking at this effort in California, which is reminiscent of the things I've seen where ICE has had essentially overrun schools where children were, and religious institutions where people were. And, there's no boundary where this unfortunate effort won't reach. And so it's a tough situation, man.
No, internationally, and, you know, I hate to say it, but these people that call themselves MAGA or they're still supporting the president, they're just so, I mean, when you say that they're brainwashed, their answer is no, you're brainwashed. If you say this is a fascist kind of movement, they say no, you're fascist. If you tell them that that we're a joke internationally, they say no, we were a joke internationally, now we're respected internationally. So there's such a divide that's just such a hard thing to overcome because of the way the media handles things, because of disinformation, and because of their fascist propensity to lie and lie and lie about everything. So the G7 is today, which I think is a good opportunity for the leaders of these other countries, the democracies in the country that have been our strongest allies for 100 years, to, you know, hopefully confront the, you know, the disinformation. At least
the disinformation is bad.
At least confront it. You know, he'll say, well, I want Russia in the G8 again. You know, you threw him out. Barack Hussein Obama threw him out. You know, it's all about Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Whatever they did, we got to do the opposite.
What do you think about this militarized birthday parade?
Oh, fascism. What are you talking
you know,
if it looks like fascism, if it talks like fascism, if it smells like fascism,
it's so
guess
interesting
what it's
because
called?
the only place that some of the most memorable images we've seen from history, have been those type, you know, similar images have been Adolf Hitler, has been North Korea,
exactly,
has been, you know,
Soviet
China,
Union,
right. So you've had
Russia today,
and you have all of this, and clearly his inspiration for this kind of performance could have come from nowhere else.
It's where it came from. He's in a contest. I don't want to call it a pissing contest, whatever you want to call it, with Putin. Who's got the bigger landmass? Well, Russia's got a bigger landmass than the United States, so we're going to annex Canada and Greenland. Therefore, we have a bigger landmass than Russia. Who's got the bigger military parades? Well, Russia's got this, so we'll do that. The people that I feel the worst for are our veterans that are, A, either rolling in their grave about seeing such a thing, and two, this is the 250th anniversary of the Army. And they had a plan for how they were going to celebrate that with historical context and museums and displays and so forth. And they were thwarted, and they were like hijacked into this birthday celebration for the dear leader. So I feel worse for the military families than anybody else.
I mean, I feel, you know, if anything, I feel worse for just about everybody, to be quite frank. The military showed this protest by not marching in unison, which I thought was very intelligent. I mean, they were basically just walking, no uniformity outside of a line. There's no uniformity whatsoever.
Did you see that?
I saw that.
Did you see what they're talking about? They're like in France and stuff, the reporters are ordered to report. They don't report that. Did you? You must have got that by seeing that yourself.
Yeah, I saw it myself.
But I don't know that our actual mainstream or whatever the media has actually.
I can't remember which media arm showed it, but it was definitely. It may have been like BBC.
Yes, European media has said that this isn't even. They're not even marching.
No, they're not. But I will say this: I can't remember who it was, but the person who was talking did not have an accent. So I will say that. I'll have to double check to see what news outlet carried that. You know, but it's just interesting because, you know, he was already who he is, right? But man, with him and Elon Musk, he just went off the rails.
Yeah.
You can see the effort now. I was watching him before I came here, doing some press conference about healthcare and medication and big pharma and how he's supposedly blows to big pharma to make medication more affordable, and you know, which appears to be some attempt to recover from the last disaster that was you know, the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the unfortunate thing, and I will say this: I do believe that there's change coming to our structural operation as a country, and I don't believe that it'll go back to what it was.
I like that. I do like that, and I think that you talk about, you go in, like Elon Musk would say, you go in quick and you break things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've done that.
Yeah,
they've gone in quick and they've broken things, which for every disaster or whatever, there comes an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's an opportunity to change the country for the better in the next coming years. I really think there's a great opportunity. People see the disaster that this is. I think the protests, the marching is only going to continue. There's going to be more forms of boycotting. And I think that there's going to be more civil, protests that's going to take place. And I think that once we get to these elections, and I think they start next week with the primaries and local elections, because in New York City, for example, he's declared war on New York City. He's declaring, going after Chicago and the governor of Illinois, because the governor stands up to him.
Well, obviously Gavin Newsom in California.
And they're going after California. Right. So I think the pushback from these great cities is going to have an impact on how the whole thing, like you say, structurally, things are going to start to change.
I made a post on social media, and I'll be candid, and I said, the protests we needed on November 5th, 2024.
Absolutely.
And when I look at the number of people throughout the streets, I can't help but think how many of them
didn't vote
or
voted the other way for some reason.
But and I'm pretty sure, I hate to, I don't want to speculate, but we know how the numbers are generally. Mm-hmm. Pretty sure a large number of them didn't bother to go to the poll.
Yeah.
So it's a little, and I'll be candid, I've never been a fan of what I call feel-good marches. When the march is no threat, because they know eventually you'll go home and you'll just go back to habit.
Understand.
Unless, to your point, you mentioned the local elections. The real statement has to be made in the local election, the gubernatorial elections.
Exactly.
And then if the eventual presidential election.
Well, the congressional election next year.
In the congressional election, because this in terms of rebuilding, this is the right time to get decent people in place for whatever this restructuring is going to be.
Yep. And I think that what we need is a democratic or progressive think tank of people that work behind the scenes, like a Schumer, like a Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie's great, his ideas are good, Schumer's great, his ideas are good, to write the playbook for a new generation, help at least the guidelines for a new generation of policy, of procedure, of how we're going to fix the broken system. And I think that's what we should be organizing right now at a macro level. Get the right people to help write the playbook. And I think that is something we can work on today.
Hey.
Nothing's stopping us from doing that now.
You have to have the left version of the Heritage Foundation. That's a fact.
Exactly.
Because absent any real game plan, we'll get more of the same. I think
the same. Too much dividing, too much,
the biggest concern that I have in regards to any type of restructuring is the same old operation, the same old ideas of, and I'm speaking as a guy who grew up in the housing projects, who grew up, initially in the subsidized space. My mother had a different type of drive, right? But everybody may not necessarily have that drive. Now, to say they have the drive is different from saying not having the opportunity.
Okay.
So the drive, meaning, they're going to get up and do
It's totally different than the opportunity. Some people have the opportunity, but they don't have the drive. It doesn't match.
It doesn't match up. We can't be victims of the hunter-gatherer ideology. I'm taking credit for coining that one, where the abundance of resources causes a concentration of population, and where the abundance of resources eliminates the need.
Yeah, well, we get complacent.
Right, that's a fact.
We get complacent and we sit back. And like you've mentioned to begin with, these protests, and they should have been November 5th or the election last time. Right. That energy should have been there. I'm hoping that energy sustains. And I'll give you a quote about this. Winston Churchill. He said, You can always depend on the American people to do the right thing after they exhausted all the wrong things.
Yeah, well,
That's where we're at.
that's very similar to something that I always say. Unfortunately, people often need crisis to change.
Yes, that's it.
And we have to learn to avert the crisis. We have to learn to make the decision when we see the crisis coming, not allowing the crisis to run its course. Unfortunately, it's run its course again. And then you can't help, Rob, but say that this unfortunate incident in Minnesota with this gunman who went to the house of 2 elected officials and killed one couple, and then the other couple was struggling to survive, who apparently had a hit list of state delegates, and federal, that he was going to ultimately carry his war out on. You can't ignore the fact that this current administration has, as many have implied before, unveiled a certain emboldened type of hatred.
Yeah, they give cover to this. They give cover to it. And I think Jasmine Crockett just recently said it best when they're doing these hearings and they dragged in Governor Hochul, Governor Pritzker, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene went after them all and hold up this picture of this Lincoln Riley and used her whole 10 minutes to say how tragic this death was with Lincoln Riley being killed by an immigrant, or an illegal, illegal person. Awful, terrible. That's that 1.1% of the immigrants are here, but they make a big thing about that. But Jasmine Crockett said, where are the hearings and the outrage from the Buffalo shooting? Where are the hearings and the outrage from the school shootings with the guys with the AR-15s and that have the white supremacist manifestos in their hip pocket?
Right.
Where's going to be the outrage from these Republicans? In fact,
we're on YouTube, so we can curse.
This congressman, whatever his name is, Mike something, you making a joke about it. He should be expelled from Congress. This is when you cross the line and start getting into political assassinations.
Yeah.
We've crossed the line, and there should be universal condemnation of that. But no, these Republicans, like you said, they give them cover. They look the other way.
Yeah.
Man, if this was an illegal immigrant,
well, you take the situation with Minnesota. Outside of a tweet, I believe there was no statement made by the president, to my knowledge.
That's it. Yeah.
No statement made by any other person.
Why isn't he in Minnesota? Why does he send somebody to the state capitol and say we're sorry for the?
He's doing a press conference about Big Pharma. While everybody else is trying to figure out, this.
He is, as they say, the divider in chief.
Well, I think
he absolutely has always been that way.
And I think you don't want to make I certainly don't want to make the assumption that everybody is duped in one direction or another. That those who follow him is duped, but that those who are against him are equally duped and blurred by their own disregard for him. And see him from my perspective for what he is. He is a misdirection.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when we're too preoccupied looking at a spectacle, there's some serious rearranging going on, unbeknownst to the people. You look up and the environment is different, and I think that is the danger we have to watch out for.
As we said one time before, I don't know if it got on air, but one time before, a guy like Elon Musk can make a big difference in a moment like this in history. If he can redirect some of the vitriol and division in the country to unification over issues that make sense, that people all agree upon, he's got the wherewithal, the money, and the ability to do that. He just needs to talk to somebody other than the guy in the White House. He's got to talk to somebody with some gravitas on the other side. Talk to General Milley. Talk to General Kelly. Talk to Arnold Schwarzenegger. have a meeting with these people and say, what can I do to help this country?
I think my position on it. I don't think Elon Musk can do anything to help this country, to be quite frank. And I really think that Trump may succeed at getting them deported. But I will, it's because I think he was on a pinky and a brain mission, and somebody saw it right to pull Trump's coattail to say, hey, this guy is pulling your strings.
Yeah.
I think that really is the case, especially when we watch Elon Musk kids stand there and threaten Trump, and tell him that he wasn't the president.
Yeah. Well, there's no question that
Elon was definitely talking trash about him at home.
At some point in time, Trump realized, I gotta get rid of this guy.
Yeah.
No question about that. But I do think that he, on his own, I think he just said something like he's allowing the Iranian people to use Starlink because of their communication systems are brought down. Talk about a fascist regime.
Well,
this is how they work.
Even in that respect, like when it was thrown out there, and I think I mentioned it initially, and it turned out to not be true, that he was considering a touchless cell phone with the same capability as an iPhone, but only for $200.
Yeah.
That would have been a power move, I think that a lot of people would have appreciated had that actually been the case.
Yeah.
But he did say if he thought that the phone companies was continually unfair and overpriced, that he would, but they're clearly unfair and overpriced.
Isn't there something now that they're talking about a Trump mobile, like
Yeah, nobody wants that phone. So we want to hear your comments, your thoughts. Obviously, we talked about a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on.
We got through a lot. I will just say, in ending today, that the primaries are on the verge of happening. I think in here in New York, early voting started. So let's get all the people that can vote to vote. They're so important. And in voting, find your beauty and grace.
That's right. Who you vote for now matters. So make sure you get out there. This is Khalid,
Rob Romeo.
Catch you on the next one.